Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner, brought to you by your favorite, maybe not favorite, but definitely your most passionate AI coaches, Ian Hall, Dan McCann from SimTrain. Super excited, Ian, about today's episode, and you know
Yes,
why.
absolutely. You've got a former teammate here, an alumni.
Yes,
So
yeah. So
fantastic.
so so excited to invite Brian Gaine.
Great
So
to be
Brian
with you guys.
Brian Gaine, let me tell you guys, assistant general manager for the Bills, over 30-year career in the NFL. Well, more than 10 teams, right, Brian?
Well, it's been five. Two of the teams I was with twice.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So five
Mhm.
teams. So plenty of coaches, including Bill Parcells, right? That you coached with and played for and coached with, or just coached with?
I actually played for Bill and then scouted under Bill for three organizations.
Yeah, that's
Wow,
awesome. Yeah,
fantastic.
so illustrious background, but I'm sure his favorite team he ever played on was the one that he played with me. We were dual tight ends in 1990. By the way, all 4 years, so not just 1990. But Brian was an amazing tight end, the best tight end in the state of New Jersey, and I had the honor of playing on his team with him. So, Brian, welcome to Coach's Corner. And if we left anything out, please add a little bit on your background, specifically around coaching, and we're excited to talk to you about it today.
Yeah, thank you for having me all. Again, my name is Brian Gaine. I'm the current assistant GM at the Buffalo Bills. I've had a long career in NFL front offices, working specifically on the scouting side of things and player personnel. I've been with five different organizations, and although I've had a great career at the professional level, some of my best memories were from my high school years playing football with Dan McCann, yours truly here. And I thought what made that team quite unique was the people, the chemistry, the camaraderie, group of people that came together that were selfless, good teammates. Learned a lot about how important the chemistry piece was to building championship rosters and teams. And I tell this story often that state championship team that we won the states our senior year, it was 8-3, not 11-0. It was 8-3.
Yep.
And in those three losses, I felt like our team growed exponentially by facing the adversity. And I thought those losses better prepared us to handle adversity and make a run at a championship.
I
So
think that's
Brian, you
key.
mentioned adversity. That's interesting. As far as coaching and can you go a little bit into like how coaching impacted like that diversity and how you dealt with it? That's an interesting, like I said, 8-3 state champion. So you were dealing with some losses. How did coaching have an impact on that?
Yeah, when I think back on coaching, even just my whole career, not just high school, but just I'll tie that in here in this conversation. The one thing I always think about when it comes to coaching is the preparation piece. Like, when you turn the TV on Sunday or Saturday and you're watching college football on Saturday or Sunday, like we talk a lot here at the Buffalo Bills about embracing the process, about trusting the process. And the process is the Monday to Friday piece or the Monday to Saturday piece for us at the pro level. And when I think back to those years, and Dan can attest to those high school years, like, our practices were tough. They were physical, like they were hard, and game day was almost the easy part. So when I think back about even my high school years, college years, pro years, like a lot of coaches that I was fortunate to have just taught me the process of getting ready for game day. And that was like, here's your routine on Sunday, after you play on Saturday. Here's how we approach it on Monday and Tuesday. Like, here's what the Tuesday and Wednesday heavy days of practices are going to look like. Here's what your process is going to be to get ready to play on Saturday, on Thursday. So it was more about learning the process of like the preparation piece when I reflect back on all the good coaches that I had. And I felt like those lessons I learned at a young age, even those high school years, like launched me and kind of catapulted me into my college career, into my professional career.
Yeah, and Ian, I always told my father, I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm playing against the best tight end every day." So when I pancake Brian at practice, I always tell him I love him, right?
Right.
And no, that never happened, never happened.
Oh no,
But
it made us better. The competition like made us better. I reflect on all those years. Like we played at a very, very competitive school and we had very good players on our team. Like it brought the best out of everybody, like every day in practice, so that when we went to play on Saturday, like I felt like we were ready to play at a high level.
yeah, that's back when we still played on Saturday. Now it's Friday nights.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So Ian, the other thing most people don't know, right, is when you talk about adversity with Brian Gaine, right? I think where he really learned it was as a young kid, he would go out to Ireland every year and he would go play Gaelic football. And I'm like, Brian,
Wow.
what the hell is Gaelic football? It's rugby, right? And he's like, no, it's Gaelic football. So Brian, also the youngest of five brothers, that does help deal with adversity. He probably got beat up quite a few times as a young guy, but I saw him with these brothers and they all took care of him through high school. But maybe you could share a little bit about, Gaelic football and how that made you tough and able to deal with people like Bill Parcells and Dan McCann.
Sure. Dan McCann specifically. I played Gaelic or Irish football from like under the age of 10, maybe 8 or 9, all the way through 18 years old before the summer I left for the University of Maine to go play football. As Dan knows, my parents are from Ireland. They grew up there, immigrated to the States in the early 60s, and it was just part of our culture. Gaelic football growing up, my brothers played it, I played it. It was a blend of probably, I would say, rugby with soccer, and has a physical piece, an element to it, as well as a skill element to it. And I played defense. I wasn't the most fleet of foot, but I just kind of knew the concepts and how to play and how to defend. And I had some height, I had some size, and I had some length, which maybe wasn't as present as much in that arena. And I was able to use my blend of football into the Gaelic football arena. A lot of my teammates were soccer players, but I was one of the few American football kids that played, so I was able to blend some of the physical pieces into it. Played it all the way till I was 18 years old. Certainly taught me a lot about conditioning because of the running that's involved, the ability to play at a high level deep into the fourth quarter. I learned all those lessons playing American football too, developing some of my lateral movement skills, like some of the skills maybe that I didn't have early years in football. Playing Gaelic football was able to help me develop in maybe some of those other areas that I needed, just foot speed, agility, quickness, lateral movement skills, just spatial awareness, just based on where the ball is and where your zone was and where your goalie was. So a lot of those lessons that I learned in Gaelic football, I was able to apply to American football.
And Brian, one of the cool things we always talk about, Ian and I, is the concept of these companies that, apply coaching with their employees. There's so many different definitions, right? Leadership development, that's coaching, right? Skills development, that's coaching. Onboarding people, right? And all these different areas. From your perspective, especially as you talk about all these skill sets and fundamentals that you learned in Gaelic football that you then applied to, American football in your career, right? Is what are your thoughts about the different elements of coaching around player development, which I know you're passionate about, as well as team development and coaching a team to compete to win championships? Like, what are some of your thoughts around, player development and skills-based coaching at different levels?
Yeah, I think you got to have a plan. Both, I would say, a universal plan for how you want to develop your team, but also an individual plan for how you want to develop those skills and perhaps even the intangible pieces of what it is to be a professional athlete. So I would say that just having like the physical piece of it, like, hey, here's where you are right now in terms of the evaluation. All right, here are your strengths, but here are the things that you need to go improve on from a physical standpoint. You need to get stronger, you need to get more explosive, develop more power, need to get faster, more better foot agility, whatever it is. So I just think from our end, in my arena, like we're always talking about, all right, here's the physical piece part. All right, here's the intangible piece. And when we draft players and bring players into the NFL, like they may range, it's happened before, as young as 19 to 20 to as high as like 23, 24. And a little bit with the COVID impact, every now and then we do get a guy as a rookie in the 24 to 25-year-old range, but they're not done developing. They
Yeah.
may have a physical ceiling that may be near, all right, but we're also trying to develop being a pro part of it, of the developing the habits and behaviors, and what we call it in our end, it's player engagement or player development. Like when we get a player, we talk a lot about the onboarding process, but we
Yeah.
also talk about the piece of like the intangible piece of developing the professional habits and behaviors and whatever those things may be. All right, here's how we approach the weight room. Okay, when you're in the training room with the sports medicine staff, like this is the approach we take when we're in there. This is what recovery and wellness looks like for you when you're off the field. All right. This is how you take care of your body. Here's the nutritional piece. This is how we study and prepare in the football classroom. This is how we will install the playbook for you. This is how you're going to absorb information. Here's what the expectations are from practice habits. Here's what it means to be a good teammate from the chemistry standpoint, whatever it might be. So we spend a lot of time as much on the intangible piece, developing that as much as the physical piece.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. And there seems like there's so many parallels to coaching in our space. Brian, you mentioned the getting first of all preparation and like the game day being the kind of easy part, and because of that preparation before and in our space in AI coaching, like being on with the customer, right, is the game day and being prepared for that. But I look at and the coaching that goes into it and skill development, but I look at the parallels of finding those skill gaps and then improving upon those and evaluating them. And I imagine it's developing those exercises and practice regiment to focus on those specific areas so they can get your players can get better here, and then the other areas that various areas that you mentioned, and they have to kind of then gel all of that together to become a complete player both on and off the field.
Player and teammate.
Yeah, and right to just to help the team. Is that you kind of see that like gelling together and putting all those pieces together? Would love to expand on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'm going to make a lot of references to the Bills because I've learned so much since I've been here. But one thing we subscribe to is just a growth mindset, improvement mindset. Like that's our approach every day. We're going to talk about embracing the process and trusting the process, and that's the prep process. But we want our players to buy into the growth mindset, improvement mindset. No matter how talented you are, there's always going to be something else that you can be better at the next day. So let's try to get 1% better than you were the day before. And part of that is just a cultural piece. And that's, part of the messaging I think that our coaches do a great job of with our players is just every day we're building to get better. Focus on just getting better today. Don't worry about Thursday. Don't worry about Friday. Just focus on Wednesday of what we have to do today to get ready to play on Sunday. So growth mindset, improvement mindset is something that we preach a lot to our players. And I think that's resonated with some of the results that we've had.
Yeah, and so Brian, so at SimTrain being around for the last 7 years, we started as a training simulation technology, right? Where we would onboard folks, just like you talked about preparation, and we have morphed into becoming an AI coaching application specifically because AI has helped us connect to data and use that data to target exercises and pinpoint those exercises for individuals in the Bills, or actually in your career, Brian, even some older technologies, what are some technologies that you've been able to lean in on, or what's the part that technology has played in assessing talent, right? And being able to say, okay, this is what these strengths are, these are where we need to work and continue to develop certain players, and being able to leverage those technologies to continue to elevate the coaching at the different levels for these players.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. We've tried to maximize our use of technology here at the Bills. Number one, from our scouting database and systems, just making sure that we're maximizing like the data input and the data return that we're able to help impact decisions. Like we want to be able to make decisions we collect a lot of information, but how best to present that information so that we can make what we call actionable decisions, like useful, applicable decisions. So part of that is the data that our scouts collect, and then there's another piece that we talk about from the analytical piece. Like we have a football analytics department as well that we integrate into our scouting systems, that we integrate into our coaching process as well. A lot of that is self-analysis, but it's also like opponent analysis, and it's also a global analysis of what's going on in the league so that we can study trends and use information to help us make the best decisions. And I'm going to talk again one more about process. Like we make sure that we have like a very good process of like how we just using this as an example. All right, what's our process of how we run free agency? Okay, talk to us about the process about how we run our draft meetings in December, February, or April. Are we maximizing that process to arrive to the best decisions? So as long as we have good process and we're able to funnel that information in a way by maximizing technology to lead us to the best decisions, then we're in a good place. One piece I can stress to you is we have critical factors and position specifics in our evaluation process. Let's say, for example, Dan, we're scouting a tight end.
Yeah.
Like here's the 7 or 8 things our scouts and coaches have to evaluate from a critical factor standpoint. Here's the 7 or 8 things that our scouts and coaches have to evaluate from a position specific standpoint. Critical factors, position specifics may be height, weight, speed, quickness, agility, balance, or body control. And then position specifics may be specific to the tight end position, blocking, route running, separation skills, hands, run after the catch, whatever it might be. We also, the piece that I really want to talk about is that we have put a numerical grade onto each one of those critical factors and position specifics. And part of the reason we do that is so that we can study the analytical piece of it, the data piece of it, of like, all right, let's pretend the 9 to 1, that's your range. Let's pretend the 9 is rare and the 1 is poor or limited. We're able to extract those numbers to say, like, hey, here's a trend in the NFL draft. 9 out of 10 of the tight ends that got drafted in the first 3 rounds scored an 8 or above in speed. There's a trend that we need to be paying attention to, how important speed is at the tight end position. Hey, 8 out of 10 of the tight ends that got drafted in the first 4 rounds had we graded instincts a 7 or better. We need to be looking for those tight ends who are scoring 7 or better, because that's a trend that's developing. So rather than just saying, yeah, he's got good instincts, yeah, he's got good hands, we're able to now numerically study like how useful those numbers that we're using to grade traits to help us make better decisions on draft day.
That's awesome. And Brian, what's kind of neat too, when you talk about players, and coaches developing players, players have to have a big part of that game. I know you were telling us earlier, I think you graduated Don Bosco at 190 pounds, maybe 193, and
Yeah.
then got ready your freshman year at Maine at 2 1/4, and probably played between 225 and 250 at your time at Maine. I will tell you, one of the things that impressed me the most was when we were in college. I was talking to folks about Brian Gaine, right? Only great things, Brian, by the way. And what I was being told was, hey, by the way, just so you know, every summer Brian's going out, shipping himself out to the Midwest, and he's doing speed training so he can become the fastest tight end he possibly can, and potentially maybe get ready for an NFL draft opportunity, right? But so I love that part about the size that you needed to play at, the strength you needed to play at. But even way back then, right? Every kid today does speed and agility, but nobody was doing it back in the 90s, right? I mean, in the 80s, this was like 80s, early 90s. So I love the fact that you made a commitment to that, and knowing. How did you know, Brian? Like, who was telling you, hey, Brian, your speed is probably the thing you got to go work on, and so you committed to that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, certainly coaches. And, I think there's a level of awareness as well, self-awareness of like, hey, like here are the strengths of what you are, but here are the things you're going to need to improve on and get better. And I think any player, and I made sure that I wanted to talk about this, like I think my experience as a player and then segueing into the front office, like dealing with players and working with players, like ultimately players want to hear the truth.
Yep.
And the truth may be great to hear sometimes, and the truth, may not always be the most pleasant thing to hear sometimes when it comes to like harsh, direct evaluations. And that was the feedback that I had gotten from my coaches. Thankfully, they were honest with me. And what I decided to do was to put a plan in place of like how I was going to attack my perceived weakness. And my perceived weakness at that time as a player was speed. And I knew how important the 40 time was going to be as I got closer to the NFL opportunity window. So luckily, I had a family relation out in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, where for 2 summers I spent 12 weeks living with, it was my sister-in-law's brother who ran this program. And for 2 straight summers, I lived with him for 12 weeks, like wasn't at school, wasn't home having a good time, wasn't down at the Jersey Shore. Like I was out there working 5 days a week on my speed, and was able to knock a couple of tenths off my 40 time. So there was coaches that gave me that feedback, but also gave me the direction of like, hey, here's perhaps how you can attack this to make this improve and become a strength, hopefully someday.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. I love how you mentioned data and how important that is to use in your, evaluation of players. And I love, the connection between you as a player and then in the front office. Were there any other things like that? Did you have a coach that stood out in pointing these things out that you needed to improve upon? and then put those kind of recommendations and evaluations in place. And you can even, maybe it's you personally or somebody within an organization that you've worked with that really use that, because we use that data in our space, right, to analyze those skill gaps and then develop specific exercises for those contact center agents for improvement in different areas. So we'd love to see if there's a particular coach or their style that
And
stood
Brian,
out to you.
I'd love to make it a two-part question, right? So this data-driven coach that you're going to talk about. Also, favorite coach and why? Maybe
Yeah,
make it
yeah.
a two-part question. My data-driven guy or gal, and then my favorite coach and why.
Gotcha. I would start with the favorite coach piece, and I'll talk to about the data-driven coach. But I would say from the high school years, this is somebody that Dan knows. Like it's probably hard to believe, but I had a coach named Bill Stiegel.
Ha!
Yeah, I've shared this story with Dan, and I believe Bill was a postman, worked for the
He
U.S.
was.
Postal Service. All right, but he coached the heck out of Dan and I. He coached the defensive line and the defensive ends. He was a very influential coach at that stage of life because of one specific reason. Like he installed confidence in me that I don't even think that I believed that I was as good as maybe Coach Stiegel believed I was. He just installed this like I can do it attitude. But it was the part that like he prepared us week to week to go out and feel ready on Saturdays. And that at such a young age, like I was impacted by that exponentially in terms of confidence and developing the grit factor, like what it took intangibly to play football and be good at it, like from the physical and mental toughness standpoint, the resiliency piece, like the persistence piece, like as a young man, like I'm thinking I'm learning those things, but I really didn't know what that was until he taught me those things. At the college level, I was fortunate enough to have a position coach named Joe Gilbert. He's the current O-line coach at the Carolina Panthers. And he was able to unlock for me the technical aspect of blocking. Like it wasn't just engaging the defender and locking the guy up, but learned so much about the footwork piece. And that allowed me to ascend in the run game. So he gave me a technical aspect of my game that I was missing that perhaps I didn't even know existed. The third part of Joe's strengths was he was able to build relationships. Like his people skills were outstanding, plus his instincts for people, working with people. So he was able to blend together like the relationship piece with the technical piece. I think when a player knows that like this coach can give you the tools in your toolbox to go out and be successful on Saturdays, like there's great buy-in, complete buy-in. And Joe was able to unlock what I would say was my lower body in the run game, and that allowed me to take another step in my career. And I feel like that positioned me maybe to become an NFL prospect at that time.
That's awesome. Hey,
I'm
hey,
a,
Brian, I don't know Joe that well, but Bill Stiegel was the reason I went to Bosco,
no
right? And
kidding.
and so we definitely have that in common as well. And by the way, tell me if you recognize this quote, Brian. Gaine, if you're gonna be good at football, you gotta be good at football.
I could put a few names on that quote. There's probably a couple of characters that we could recall from those days, but from the data driven standpoint, I've had multiple coaches, and I'll lean on the preparation piece here. Like when we would break down even college and at the professional level, like when we would break down situational football, like I can say like multiple coaches that I've had have been able to educate and stress these factors during the preparation week. And what I mean by that is like, all right, here's what the opponent looks like on third down from 3rd and 3. Here's what the opponent's statistical output is or percentages are from 3rd and 4 to 3rd and 6. Here's the defenses that they play mostly when it's 3rd and 7 or longer. All right, here's the red zone percentages of the defenses and coverages you can expect when we're in the red zone, when we're in the lower red zone. All right, here's the defenses you can expect when you're in 2-minute offense or 4-minute offense. So a lot of the data driven piece of as it relates for me and my experiences with coaching has been, all right, here's the percentages that we can expect to see of either coverages or defenses that we would face as it relates to situational football. And those are just some of the examples that come to mind.
That's awesome. I mean, it's again so many parallels because we think about agents and coaching them up, and like, I mean, it's amazing like the level of detail that you're providing there, and with customer interactions and our agents, it's like here are the different things that you may face with customers that we're going to prep you on, and then once you go through it, We're going to evaluate you, see where the gaps are, and then evaluate and kind of continue. Okay, are we getting better? You mentioned 1% better. Are we getting better in that particular area? And then just constantly that coaching cycle, we call it, I think is just so important to recognize. And it sounds like you've been through that so much as a player and as an executive.
Well, one
Hey,
thing I would
Brian.
stress, Ian, is when I
Go ahead,
talk
Brian.
about when I talk about situational football, like these things are rehearsed during the week. It's
Mhm.
not just you're not just sitting in a meeting and being fed information that, hey, when we're on 3rd and 3 or less, they're in 80% of this coverage or this defense. Like that would then be rehearsed and applicated and reinforced in a practice session.
Mhm.
Like, hey, today we're practicing this. Like in the meetings, you'd be told we're going to practice against this. All right. So when we go out to the practice session and we have this period 8, period 9, period 10, like we are going to apply this data in that setting. So it gets reinforced in the classroom, but then the physical piece gets reinforced through the practice process.
I love it. Brian, that's almost like a perfect conclusion on, sim training and AI coaching, right? Taking data, right? Making sure people are aware and know how to perform effectively, but then running through the repetition and bringing it into an environment where they can practice and learn how to perform, and then bring it into the production environment and measure them to identify the next coaching opportunity. That's exactly what we do. And Brian, just curious, right? So we mentioned Gaelic football. You answered that by talking about immigrant parents. I think anyone who can go online can see that you were part of a basketball team in the Gaine family, right? You were the youngest of 5 boys, so you had your own basketball team. You got 4 kids of your own, right? Tell
Sir.
us something about Brian Gaine that we can't go look up or we won't go figure out going online.
Wow, that's an interesting question. You know, when I think back about my life and like my childhood years, just so many people impacted my football career, not just coaches, but it was also friendships, relationships, people from my hometown, people from my high school. Just I think the impact on growing and developing an athlete goes beyond just the coaching piece. I think about like the support that I got from my parents and how influential that was. And I've shared this story before, and I know that I wasn't a perfect player, but the confidence element you heard me talk about earlier, when I think back to like my father, who was an Irish immigrant, knew nothing about American football. Based on what I know now, like the law of averages, it was virtually impossible for this to be true. But after every game, he'd be waiting for me, and my family would be waiting for me after every game. The support that I had from my family was outstanding. Like to have the career that I've had, there's no way I would have succeeded without their support because it revolved around confidence. You heard me talk about that earlier. And my dad would tell me after every game, "You did great. Hey, you really played well. You did great." And I started to believe him. But based on what I know now in my career, like the law of averages, that's virtually impossible. There's no way I played great after every game. But I think it was just the impact that my family, friends, my parents like had on my career when I think back. And I'm trying to apply that now as you mentioned about my kids as they go through their athletic careers. I'm trying to apply that very much the same right now. And I'll give you a great example. My youngest son is 10. He played in a baseball game. He pitched well the first inning and then gets rocked the second inning that he's in there. He's 10 years old. And I can see it on his face like he's trying to work his way out of the inning. The base is clear. It's 2 outs. The next batter that comes up after the guy cleared the bases, he strikes him out. And
Yeah.
after the game is over, they lost, but after the game is over, like I use that as like a very teachable moment to be like, you know why I'm very proud of you? I was like, because of how you responded to the adversity. And I felt very proud in that moment because he's either learned that from his brothers or he's actually been listening to me over all these years about talking about how to handle when something negative happens. Like you're measured as an athlete sometimes by how you respond to that adversity. He's 10 years old. And that was one of my prouder moments of watching him be an athlete was how he responded to that adversity. Very, very much what my dad did with me. And here I am now, like 30, 40 years later, doing that with my son. So the impact of your family, friends, relationships, I think on my career has been exponential.
Hey, Brian, how about your favorite movie? Tell us about that and why.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because it was on TV just the other day, and I said
Nice.
this to my wife. I was like, I think this is my favorite movie. I could watch The Fugitive with Harrison Ford like 50 times a year if it was on, and it would feel like it was new. Just the nonstop action, the drama, like the constant effort and persistence the guy put forward to try to prove that he was innocent. But great movie, awesome movie. I think every decade you could watch it and feel like it's new.
Excellent. Book, do you have one for a favorite book as well for us?
I wouldn't say it was one favorite book, but it's my favorite writer, and it was Bill Walsh. And it's, of course,
Yeah.
football junkie.
Yeah.
So Hall of Fame coach, Bill Walsh, longtime head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He wrote three books. I've read all three of them, just about the blueprint of how to build a Super Bowl winner and how they built it with the 49ers. But it goes deep into philosophy, leadership, the organizational culture, organizational expectations, and how impactful the organizational architecture is to the impact of what occurs on the field. It was basically the blueprint of how the 49ers built it, but he dives deeper outside of the roster building piece and talks about how he built the coaching staff, like how impactful the weight room was, like how impactful their scouting evaluation process was, and talked a lot about organizational football structure. So all those pieces of what it took to be a winner, I thought those three books were outstanding.
Yeah,
Pretty
Brian,
good.
thanks.
Pretty good
Thanks so
selection.
much for joining us today.
Yeah.
It's so amazing, right? As we talk to different coaches and player developers and folks who have been coached by different folks over their careers, the how much impact that has on corporate world and employees and what they need to do to develop and continuously get better. But they are part of a team, right? And that team needs to perform really well, or the company doesn't do well. So we love the correlation. Your stories were awesome today, Brian. You're inspirational. I love the family connection on the things we don't know about you. Anyone who knows you or knew that already, right? About your four brothers and your parents and that impact. And I love the fact that you're taking that down to how you're impacting the lives of the next four Gaines coming along. So Brian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome.
Good luck in the season.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.